Well, as I said earlier, that if this theory is correct, then maybe we can use it to answer some outstanding problems in the field of consciousness science. So, primarily, we will be addressing the hard problem of consciousness, but we'll also cover briefly the problem of other minds, how to gauge AI and animal consciousness, as well as differentiate between wake and dream states and intentional and instinctual behavior. So, to begin, what is the hard problem? Well, the hard problem is how do physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experience? How does the impersonal become personal? How does life acquire this subjective quality, this qualia to it? Well, according to this theory, once you develop the brain, the mechanism for integrating and interpreting information, by information I mean biochemical and physical or electrical signals, that each new stimulus is necessarily measured against the total aggregate of that individual's cumulative experience. That's to say that experiences build upon one another. The idea that whatever comes before will inform what comes afterwards. Simply put, that you always remember your first. So what we can consider this appropriately enough is something we'll call this the relativity of experience. So just to give you an example of what I mean, let's take this red baseball cap. Now you take a look at this baseball cap, and I'm not sure what your subjective experience of it is, but for me, when I look at this baseball cap, I see my first Texas Rangers game with my dad, and that experience, at least relative to the general populace, that's unique to me. But how did this single stimulus generate different responses? And ultimately, how are we supposed to frame this effect? Well, I believe that's the beauty of what this model does. It establishes an objective framework for subjective experience that outside of this event horizon, that in this physical, chemical, and biological spheres, that all the information can be quantified, it can be examined, analyzed, it can be put into some numerical form and compared. But once you get to the realm of this beyond this event horizon, that once you get to the realm of the mind, that everything becomes a lot more subjective, a lot more interpretational, a lot more qualitative, and much more difficult uh, to to quantify in a sense. That how do you attach a number to an experience? That contained within this event horizon is the collective store of all your thoughts, your ideas, and your emotions, all of which shape the way in which you interpret the world and ultimately how you interact with it. That when you see the color blue, for example, you're not just seeing the color, you're also seeing all the associations that you make to that color, associations that you've cultivated over the course of your lifetime. That when we are addressing the hard problem of consciousness, we need to recognize the role of memory. And I'm not just talking about your short term, day to day working memory, or even of your own personal long term memory. I'm also talking about your genetic memory, of all those skills, traits, and instincts that have been passed on to you from your ancestors, all of which contribute to the unique way in which you personally view the world. That memories are important. They form the foundation of who we are as well as what we'll become, and they inform everything that we do. And I think memory is the answer to the hard problem. Now, if that seems like a simplistic answer to what appears to be a complex issue, then let's not forget that memories are entirely unique to you. That there's no other being in the universe that shares your exact same set of memories and experiences. And so, if you're going to predicate what makes life special, what makes it unique on anything, then well, memory seems to be the most appropriate candidate. And also, let's not forget that memory is not a single thing; that it's actually a confluence of different physiological factors working together to produce a seamless experience of time. And so it's whatever is essentially hidden beyond that event horizon, that belongs entirely to you. That's yours. That those memories are, well, they're not subject to outside influence in a sense. That they belong to you, and ultimately that no one else can touch them. So now I recognize that by framing it in such a way, that by saying people are their own individual black holes, that may set some people off, but by doing so, it helps us address certain other problems, such as the problem of other minds, as well as how we distinguish between these different consciousness states. So first off, what is the problem of other minds? Well, the problem of other minds is, how do you know that other sentient beings exist? How do you know that you're not living your own lonely solipsistic existence? That there are other people there in the simplest sense. Well, I think the key to that would be something known as intentionality, or simply intention. So what do I mean by that? Well, intentionality is the ability to display a set of directed behaviors, to display an individual or individual individual specific purpose. That is something as opposed to a more generic goal, such as finding food or finding water. Those are more biological predispositions. So if we could detect intention, that would be the key to determining the difference between a sentient being and what the industry calls philosophical zombies, a thing that appears to have consciousness but really doesn't. So I recognize that this is probably easier said than done, but if we could detect correlation between brain states and behavior, either through better mechanistic or through even intuitive means, that's how you would tell if other minds exist. However, with that said, if you pay attention to the diagram at the bottom right hand corner, that because qualia exists within tier 4, within this event horizon, what that suggests is that because we can actively recall different qualitative states, is that intention also resides within tier 4. And what that means is that it may be practically unfeasible to ever detect intention. However, I'm not saying that's impossible. So if we can do that one day, then that would be probably the most promising way forward. However, given the fact that we can stratify consciousness in this way, that now we can actually place animal and AI consciousness. Animals, they already have biological consciousness. They already have tier 3 consciousness. And for those that have developed a brain, such as monkeys, great apes, dogs, cats, livestock even, that all of them, they may very well have already developed a sort of tier 4 consciousness. They already have their own rich internal subjective lives, and that probably has some ethical ramifications going forward as to how we interpret our relationships with these other living beings. As for artificial intelligence, at this point in time, for the most part, they seem to be relegated to tier 2. They are subject to they're subject to environmental or chemical consciousness, that they're still subject to their code. That unlike living beings, they can't change, they can't evolve, not in the same way that at least biological things can. So that's not to say that they'll never get there, but at this point in time, they haven't been able to display their own intent, and I believe that's the key. And this intent is also the difference between wake and dream states, that when you're asleep, that intention seems to just disappear. It seems to dissolve. You exist on the periphery of this event horizon, and that black hole seems to evaporate. But when you're awake, that intentional state collapses to form that black hole, and you experience that kind of directed behavior to which you're normally accustomed in the day-to-day workings. And also, this is the difference between tier 3 and tier 4. And similarly, this difference between these two tiers is also the difference between intentional and instinctual behavior. That, again, if we could learn to detect intention, then that would be the key for that could probably have some legal ramifications in terms of how we determine the severity of crimes, such as say distinguishing between crimes of passion versus premeditation. And I suppose being able to frame it in such a way seems to have some practical benefits. Now, with all that said, all these problems that I've addressed rather cursorily, I'll admit that these problems have been purely relegated to the field of consciousness studies itself. But because this theory involves actual real physical phenomena, maybe we can actually use it to resolve certain interpretational issues in the field of quantum mechanics and cosmology. And that'll be the topic of our next video.